That was the Israeli campaign strategy in 1982, 1983. Strikes into Beirut, throughout the south, at Palestinian targets, at civilian infrastructure, at financial centers. It eliminated the PLO as a military threat to Israel, but as we've already discussed, it engendered Hezbollah, a far more lethal, more potent adversary than the PLO ever dreamed of being. Mm-hmm. And this military campaign that Israel is undertaking in Lebanon is simply not going to silence the rocket fire or the guns.
So what is the answer then? Because you've mentioned a resolution 1701, and that was what was in place as a sort of a ceasefire mechanism after the 2006 war that we've just been talking about between Israel and Hezbollah. And yet I think all sides, including observers, you tell me whether you agree, it just was never implemented, and the UN was unable to. It doesn't have force as its mandate, and it just apparently wasn't implemented. Do you agree with the fact that it failed, and therefore what is the answer?
The answer, if there is one, is in the change in circumstances. That Hezbollah has been badly hurt with its leadership eliminated. Iran is on its back foot. Israel has a huge problem with continued fire across its border that prevent 60,000 Israelis from returning home. So it may be that all parties would have an interest now that they did not have in 2006 in first a ceasefire and then an effort to implement 1701. The Lebanese government, such as it is, has announced that it is prepared to send the Lebanese army to the south. UNIFIL would strengthen its presence, and we would have to see if there are the makings of at least an indefinite calm in this region, because the course that Israel is on now is simply not producing the results it seeks. The 60,000 Israelis are no closer to going home than they were on October 8th.
Can I ask you this, because there have been leaks, and apparently the Biden administration is investigating about the Iran situation. Leaks from Pentagon documents which seem to suggest their views or what they've been told by Israel or what they've noticed about Israel's military and armament maneuvers, which they think is ahead of a retaliation strike that everybody's waiting for against Iran. At the same time, we've heard, whether it's leaked or whether it's fact, that Israel says that it will hit military targets rather than oil and nuclear sites. What do you think is going to happen, and what will the result be? What can Israel expect by striking Iran?
I can't begin to predict what the nature of an Israeli strike would be. We've heard, as you say, that they have taken the nuclear and oil facilities off the target list. But whatever they do strike, assuming it is a hard-hitting one, I think it's going to push the conversation in Tehran even more sharply toward the development of a nuclear weapons capability. Because what they have seen, certainly, is that their conventional weapons against Israel, their ballistic missiles, intermediate and medium-range missiles, have been singularly ineffective. So that leaves them, I can imagine the argument again in Tehran, with one viable option for regime survival and security, and that is the nuclear option. So the longer this conflict pursues between Israel and Iran directly, and the more it intensifies, I think the more likely it is that Iran will go into overdrive in the effort to produce a nuclear weapon.
Which would be completely the opposite of what the world was trying to do before the Americans pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. So given that that's what did happen under the Trump administration, what do you think, noticing everything that's been going on in this year as the U.S. has tried to exert influence while remaining a steadfast ally of Israel, that it doesn't appear that they are being listened to? And even after killing Sinwar, I'm just going to play what Netanyahu said, given that Biden said it should be, take the win and try to get to peace. Here's what Netanyahu said.
Now it is clear to everyone, in Israel and in the world, why we insisted on not ending the war, why we did insist, in the face of all the pressures, to enter Rafah, the fortified stronghold of Hamas where Sinwar and many of the murderers hid.
So he's basically saying, in the full flush of that victory for Israel, that the war continues.
Well, if that's what he is saying, it is not going to lead to a definitive victory for Israel or for anyone else.
But Ryan, sorry, Ambassador, what I meant was, despite what the Americans say, what leverage can their strongest ally exert for the, U.S. and regional national interests?
Well, I think the administration, and I'm not an overall fan of the administration's foreign policy. I think what they did in Afghanistan is something that is going to haunt U.S. security interests for a very long time. But I think in the case of the Gaza conflict, they have played a dubious hand exceptionally well. I think the Biden administration was right to come down immediately and wholeheartedly in support of Israel, because as I look at the events of the last year, there has been, the word genocide has been tossed around a lot. There was only one genocidal action in my estimation, and that was on October 7th itself. Not in its scope, but in its intent. And the effect of that massacre on October 7th of last year on the Israeli psyche is impossible to overestimate. That to think that we could or should have stopped weapons deliveries or taken other punitive steps against Israel would have been, I think, morally wrong, but it also would have been strategically wrong. It would have pushed Israeli public opinion farther into a corner that is them against the world, that they can count on no one, including the United States. So the administration has taken a lot of grief for its solid support of Israel. I think that was the right thing to do, but I also think that the Israeli government and the Israeli people have to recognize where their own interests lie. And they do not lie. There is nothing that they're going to gain by continuing operations indefinitely in Gaza. You cannot kill them all.
And I have 30 seconds left. Do you think Netanyahu can reshape the Middle East as he and his faction says?
Absolutely not. Not in the way that he seems to be intending. Eric Sharon and Menachem Begin reshaped the Middle East all right with their action in 1982, but it was not in Israel's interest to see the creation of Hezbollah.
Ambassador Ryan Crocker, thank you. Your decades of expertise really right in the middle of the subject that we're talking about. Thank you so much.